Oh, it looks a little different here. And when you click on that, there we go. We'll go, so here's the district grade dashboard that we presented last time, and after this meeting today, we'll go forward and now put the attendance dashboard up there. And one time back in, I just want to show them the directions. So on everyone, also for clarity, the first page will be the directions of what you're seeing or the instructions on how to interpret that data, which is important because we have to pull very specific data sets and it could give the wrong idea unless you look at that. Okay, is there any questions for us? Eric?
How are we doing?
How are we doing? I think that despite those hurricane days, that at least we can monitor now. We're a little close to last year, and I see the waves are in the same place, which means the data is accurate, but I'm hoping we can get some of those down. And when you look at the incidents of suspension...
10% higher, I mean.
Oh, out-of-school suspension, if you look at those, we can drill down to the school and investigate what those particular incidents are. And an incident will be counted twice if it's 2 kids involved, or 3 kids involved.
Mostly middle school boys, I'd imagine.
I'm not going to say.
Bridget. This is, I think it's great. I know I've already talked about this. I think you guys have done a tremendous job, and I know there's a lot of work behind it. Don't take this offensively. My husband will give me a hard time too, but the photo or the colors you used in this one, I thought looked really good. And I know there's a lot of fans of garnet and gold in here, but is our main page going to be
what we did
to match Sarasota County colors?
What we did this year is we matched Sarasota County. I'm not the artist here, but there's variety. There's a good reason to have different colors.
But aesthetically, it looked great.
Well, thank you. And I'll thank James for picking that. The first one looked good too, garnet and gold.
But there are other dashboards that we were introduced, and we want them to look different. If they were all the same color scheme, when you pull it up on the screen from sitting here, I can tell you which dashboard it is. And so there's probably not going to be an orange and blue one, but there will be other color schemes introduced.
That's be part of the bed.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
I just want to do a shout out to the Patterson Foundation again, because James Ferrara, who Denise hired this year, is as a result of their funding to get us presenting our data more publicly. As you know, Alex Pension was hired last year, and we were able to continue to employ him in the district. So thanks, James. And go forth.
So good morning. Great to be back with all of everybody this morning. Just going to wait for the PowerPoint to go ahead and load. So great. This morning we really just want to share a snapshot, an elementary snapshot, highlighting how iReady data, the data early in the school year, which is fantastic, can and is being used to identify, address, and help close learning gaps at our schools, but all the way down into individual classrooms for individual students. Today's presentation is going to be focused really on those 3 questions. What does the data tell us? So kind of how are we doing? How are we responding to the data? What are we doing with it? And then what resources and tools, and this is the piece, this is the meat of the program, what are the resources and tools that are at our teachers and our administrators' fingertips to use in response to what the data tells them? So it's our hope, honestly, at the end of the presentation that, one, you can see and have a better understanding and appreciation for the power of the tool, this instructional learning system, because it truly is making, as you've heard in previous presentations, it's really having an impact on campuses. And with me, I've got Kelly Ellington, Director of Elementary Curriculum, so she's going to give you an overview of the data, and then Michelle Close, and she is our Title I Instructional Specialist, and so she's going to speak to you not only as the specialist, but from a teacher's lens as well.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. We're happy to be here again to share some updated data with you and information about the iReady tool, as Chris said. And he mentioned how powerful a tool it is. And the power is really in the amount of specific data that we do get. We're going to share some district-level data with you, but as some of the schools already shared, the principals are looking at district view of this data, and then Michelle will take us into teacher view. So that's really the power of the tool, data that we didn't have before this early in the year to do something about. The first data slide shows how we are doing in math. And you had these previously, so you may have looked at them, but basically it's showing there's two sides here. The side on the left is last year's 16-17 Window 1 diagnostic for math, and on the right side is where we are now, where we're beginning with our current students at the beginning of this year. This diagnostic ended on September 26th. And you can look at it a couple different ways. You can go across and look at the grade levels each year and how we're having some similar situations. So as a school district, we can say that, yes, our fifth graders, about 50% of them are still at the beginning of the year, just like last year. About 50% of them are on grade level. Or we can look, you see the little arrows, we can look at our current second graders, for example, and back when they were first graders last year at this time, 21% of them at the Window 1 diagnostic were on or above level. But now as they are second graders, 30% of them are in this first window. So those little arrows direct you by cohort. Now those are the same students. So from second to fifth grades, there are slight increases from year to year. Again, this is data that we didn't have in past years and this early in the year, so we're really excited about being able to respond to it and do something about it. The next slide is also math.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm
Just
sorry.
a point of clarification. When it says at or above grade level, does that mean at or above grade level at this point in time where they should be? Or is this at or above grade level where they should be when they take the FSA?
This one is at this point in time, I believe.
It's at the, am I on?
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah, so this is looking at grade level expectation for the end of the year. So if it says 21%, that's 21% of the students are on or above where they should be by end of year.
No, it's not predictive. What it means is if they took the FSA today, which they don't have to do, 21% of them would score proficient. Wow. And so we're fortunate that they don't have to take the test till March. But what it's telling you is if we pass the test out today, that's the percentage that would score proficient. It's not predicting how they're going to do in March.
Right.
Good question.
Right. And then the next slide, though, does give us a little bit of predicted proficiency, and it's showing three windows here, three diagnostic windows compared to the FSA. So if you look, we have two windows from last year, Window 2 and Window 3 from 16-17, and then actually how those three grades did on the FSA in the spring last year. And then now we've added in the fourth row is this diagnostic one that just finished on September 26th. So when you go down the list, like grade 4, for example, last year in Window 2, those students, 73% of those students were predicted to be proficient on FSA at Window 2. Window 3, 74% of them were predicted to be proficient, and turned out 73% were proficient. So that's a little bit going into the predictability of the data. And it does show a pretty strong correlation that when this program is used strategically and how it's intended, then there is a correlation. It's pretty high. So we're happy about that. So two things. We have data now to do something with, to do something about, and the data that we're getting is highly correlated. Now the next slide shows how we're doing in reading. Again, the left side is 16-17, and the right side is currently right now how our students are doing starting at the beginning of the year. The reading diagnostic also just finished September 26th. And you can see there are gains in most. Some are significant. For example, if you follow the cohort, so follow the little arrows, our first graders last year who are now second graders, the percentage went from 30 to 44. Second graders to third graders, the percentage went from 43 to 59. Who are on grade level. So those are some significant increases. Now, we're not shying away from the decrease that we see there. So the decrease, we're not shying away from that or ignoring it. This is data that we would not know or have or be able to do, especially this early in the year. Again, I want to mention this is district view. So what this also helps us is now we can drill down to school level, as Principal Royce did, and teacher level, as his teachers are doing and other teachers in the district. So that's what's so powerful about it, that we know the data now, we have it, we can do something about it. And again, the next slide is similar to the former one with math. This is reading again, the predictability. Again, you can see a pretty strong correlation there with the two windows from last year, Window 2, Window 3. what the predictability score was, that they were predicting 66 or 69% being proficient on FSA. In grade 3, turns out 71% were. So that's exciting to us. We have data and it's correlated. It's data that we can look at, use, and respond. But most importantly, Michelle's going to now go into, from a teacher's lens, what can we do about this data?
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And good morning, Dr. Bowden, and good morning, school board members. Good morning. Thank you all so much for having me here again today to talk to you about iReady. I get really excited when I get to put that teacher lens on, because those of you who know me or may have seen me in schools, teaching is my passion. And I really think it's important to get down to the student level so that we can truly make an impact on every one of those students every day. And in order to do that, we really have to be strategic. And so when we think about the data at the district level, what do principals and teachers do at the school level? Well, they receive the same information, same predictability information, same information about how many students are on, above, or below school level, but we can dig deeper. So we can start at the school level, we can go down to the grade levels, individual classroom levels, and all the way down to the school level data. And that's where the power is. So we're going to spend a lot of our time today at that student level. So if we can go to the slides. As we go to the next slide, the first thing I want to show you is just a snapshot of what some of the schools might be doing at the school level and at the classroom or at the grade level to analyze their data. You can see that some schools are using a data wall, and they're using a data wall like this one in the photo from Cranberry Elementary School to bring their data to life, to make their data more visible for their teachers, to really get that visual of where are our students currently, where do we need to push our students to go, because then it's used as a springboard to have those conversations about what are we going to do about it and how are we going to get our students to where they need to be. So this is just an example of how Cranberry is transparent with their school level data. And this is an activity that a lot of our principals will do with teacher leaders. As we move on and we go down that funnel, funneling that data to get smaller and smaller, the next section is really looking at it at the classroom level and down to the individual student level. So a lot of our classrooms or a lot of our schools today are having our teachers and our principals meet in what we're calling data chats. And these are opportunities for principals and teachers to collaborate and look at trends and patterns across their individual classrooms. It allows them to look at the data at this individual student level and allows us to really dig and ask that question, why? I know you heard Mr. Royce talk about that why a lot. Why are students scoring where they're scoring? And as we look at the data, we can ask more and more questions about specific students to see why are they scoring where they're scoring and what can we do to be strategic about that in our plan to address those individual student needs. So the images that you see here are from GOCIO Elementary and also a few pieces from Atwater Elementary and how they utilize their data chats to look at that classroom and individual student level data. And we can't forget about our most important individuals when we're analyzing data. And yes, that is the students. We really, really believe in the importance of students being involved in their own data analysis. Involving students in their own data really allows them to see where they are, helps them in their goal setting, and we all know that when students have ownership of that data, we can accomplish a lot more together. So you can see here in these photos, this is a few examples from several different schools, but you'll see the photograph there is actually a teacher at Emma E. Booker having a data chat with her student to help set those individual goals. Teachers also a lot of times do class goals that they can achieve as a team because we're really working together to build those collaborative teams. And so this is where I'm going to put my teacher hat on. I know I'm sitting here as a Title I specialist, but as you see me out in schools, I don't think the teachers see me that way. They look at me as a peer. I am a teacher at heart, and will always be a teacher first and foremost. So when we talk about these students today, you're going to have the opportunity to quickly meet two students, very different students with very different needs. Although I'm going to be using fictitious names, these are actual students sitting in classrooms today while we speak. So the first one I want to talk to you about is Brian. So meet Brian. As you take a look at Brian's data, this is his student profile report from the first diagnostic that he completed in September. And when we take a look at Brian's data, the first thing that I notice as a 5th grade student looking at his ELA is that Brian overall in his ELA is scoring at a level 3, which does mean grade 3. So we know right from the beginning that Brian does have some challenges with him. So then I asked the question, why? Why is Brian struggling in reading? I can dig down even deeper. And when I take a look at his individual domain data, one thing I would love to point out to Brian is how well he's doing in his foundational skills. I cannot stress the importance of starting talking with students about their strengths, because we have to build from their strengths. So right away, teachers and I, looking at my data for my students, can see the areas of need and areas of strength. And when I take a look, I can see that Brian, his main area of focus is in vocabulary and comprehension. And not only comprehension, but I can dig even deeper and see that it's comprehension of informational text. And so again, teachers would ask the question, why is Brian struggling with comprehension of informational text and vocabulary? So we can dig even deeper. And so as you're taking a look, you can see there are a list of the steps of what Brian can do based on standards and what are Brian's next steps. And I do apologize, they are a little small. One of the pieces that I go to right away is I notice that the second bullet under the next step says provide additional strategies for determining word meaning. And that's falling under the area of comprehension of informational text. As a teacher, I want to really be strategic and maximize my time. So I know Brian has some difficulties in vocabulary and in informational text, and I'm willing to bet those two are closely related. So as I dig in and I look at his comprehension of informational text, teachers then may ask, what am I going to do about this? So as we look, this is, if you scroll down in his report, you'll notice that lesson 12 is directly related to his area of need. Really, all of these are. But to be strategic, I'm looking at the words in context. I feel like if I help Brian understand those words in context, that it'll not only help his vocabulary, but it will help him in his area of informational text. So, next slide. I can dig into the Ready Teacher Toolbox, and it's as simple as this. Teachers, K through 8, have access to the Ready Teacher Toolbox, and they have access to every single grade level within that toolbox. So although Brian's a 5th grader, I know in this particular area, I want to meet him where his needs are so he can feel success. So I can go into the Ready Teacher Toolbox for ELA. I can go to 3rd grade, even though Brian's in 5th grade, and I can find lesson 12 words in context. And I can see there are 3 different tools that I can use to address those specific needs. As you go through the next slide, one of the tools that I selected was the Ready Teacher Toolbox. And at the back of your packet, you should have a one-pager. This is like a 20-page document. I pulled out just one sample so you can get a better view of what this looks like, because I know it's very small on the slides. And so this resource here provides some, at the probably the very back of your packet, a one-pager Seaside Surprises.
Next to last.
And this is just a sample of one of the tools a teacher might select to address that specific need. Now, again, we're looking at the student level, but there may be 3 or 4 students in the classroom that have the same need, and that could instantly become a small group for the teacher to work with over time. So when we take a look at this tool, there's a lot of opportunities for students to engage in text. They can organize their ideas through different graphic organizers. They have opportunities for academic talk, which is really important, and then opportunities to connect their reading and their writing. So tools right at their fingertips. Now I want you to meet very quickly one more student in my class, and her name is Jen. And so Jen is a very different student with very different needs than Brian. If we look at Jen, we see that Jen's a 3rd grader, but overall in reading, Jen is performing at a level 4. So as a teacher, looking at 2 very opposite ends of the scale and knowing I have to meet the needs of every single student every day, how am I going to do this? So again, we ask that question, why? Why is she performing at a level 4? Where are those areas of strengths, and where can I continue to appropriately challenge Jen? And as I dig deeper, I can see that, again, she's tested out of her foundational skills, which is a great thing as a 3rd grade student. She's above level there. When I go down to her comprehension, she's also performing at a level 4. Her vocabulary is also above level, but I notice it's a little bit lower than some of the other areas. So that might be a great area that, although above level, I'm still targeting the area that I feel that she can grow the most. So when I take a look, again, why is she struggling in vocabulary? Let me dig a little bit deeper. I can see her next steps. And one of the very first next steps that I see is that she still needs some support with some antonyms. So being able to build that word bank and be able to use words that mean same and now antonyms, different things. And if we scroll to the next piece, this is where teachers would scroll down in their report. I have a tool that says explore antonyms, exactly what her needs are. And in the back of your packet, you can see a sample of what this other tool would look like. It comes directly from the report, no need to even go to another area or a location. And this particular tool that I selected is called a step-by-step. So teachers are really strategic and have found some really creative ways to use these tools. Sometimes they cut these up 3 ways to teach, like almost little activities that they can put in a learning center, especially for a student who is going to try to enrich and excel. And then also there's a thing on the back called check for understanding. So how do I know when my students are getting it? What's that next step? And how do I know when I can move on?
So just briefly in closing, after hearing all of that, we really wanted to stress that when teachers are using the iReady data in strategic ways and these tools in appropriate ways, then we can have a more powerful impact on instruction. We can guide our planning. If you go to the next slide, it guides their planning and instruction so they can differentiate the activities. We're building capacity among teacher teams, which I think you saw in the last presentation and some of the images that Michelle shared, where the teacher teams are working together to analyze this data, collaboratively plan for those flexible groups, and then also helping the students make learning visible by creating that ownership with students. They're setting their own goals and graphing how they're doing. So again, we're thrilled to have the data this earlier in the year. As a district administrator now, looking at the district data just gives me more questions to drill down. As a former elementary principal, looking at the grade level data and watching those cohorts move, and that gives me more questions. But as a former kindergarten teacher, I look and say, okay, is it 25% of my students and what do I do with those other 75%? And not forget the 25%. So it just leads us to more questions about our intentional planning so we can be strategic.
And I think I just want to close with those 2 pieces, intentionality and strategic. Administrators and teachers are so busy, and they're responsible. The load is so incredibly demanding on all of them, and we just want to make sure that we are using every tool at our disposal to help make sure that that planning is intentional, it's targeted, focused, and so they can be strategic in meeting the needs of our kids. Thank you very much.
You want to say anything? Bridget?
You hit on, thank you, and you did a great job, and I know very concise, and this touched on a lot of elements that I think many of us had questioned, is the predictability and then really how it's guiding us. And one thing that was stated is when you answer one question, a number of others come by, and combined with the limited amount of resource being precious in time, how are we helping teachers and administrators with that strategy so that, because I look at this and I think it's incredibly valuable, but then I'm sitting there thinking, does this disrupt their, does it work well for them at the teacher level, or is it disruptive? And if it is disruptive, but it's helpful, there are supportive services that we can provide.
Well, one of the things, speaking at the teacher level, I've only been out of the classroom a couple years, and I wish that I had this tool back then, because one of the things that we're noticing with our teachers, that it is helping them to save time. Okay. It takes a lot of that guesswork out. I remember as a classroom teacher, and even the teachers that I'm working with today, we might be quick to say, oh, the student is struggling in reading or the student is struggling in math, but we never knew the why. We didn't know what specific piece could really help us move the needle or really move that target for those students. So this tool truly is, if used strategically, something that could help them. What we're doing from our lens, as you could hear, Mr. Royce and I are one example of, we really provide that time for teachers, and I think that's the key, is providing the time and the space for that collaboration to occur. No teacher can do this alone. They need the time to be able to analyze the data as a group and as a collaborative team, and really work together as teams to decide how are we going to move our students. Today was just a little snapshot, but if you go into the classrooms, you're going to see teams of teachers working together to say, hey, I have a student who's struggling with vocabulary of context clues, so is mine, and they're regrouping and shuffling students during their intervention block. So they're really sharing that workload and really using the data to make their decisions and their planning.
If I could just quickly add, Michelle's working with our other elementary specialists so that they're able to also, as they're out in the schools and in the PLCs and working with teachers, that they're helping them integrate this data in their decisions, whatever the content area is.
2 things. Ms. Kelly, I think you went out to Taylor Ranch and served food, right? And I just
did. And
I just want to point out, at Taylor Ranch, they offered both of us the ability to wear the tomato suit.
And only you.
And I was the one who ended up wearing the tomato suit. So Kelly not only is very bright, but very nimble when she walked backwards.
Away from the tomato suit.
But I also want to go to Ms. Ziegler's point is, I got to be in a couple classrooms, and I saw that some of the teachers who use this data actually allowed them to be more efficient in how they targeted their classroom time. So I think some, just like anything else, a little time on the front end, saves so much time on the back end. So you do have teachers that are doing it. I hope all the teachers are doing that. And I'm just, my question is you get this data. I mean, is it causing you to do any course corrections, tweaking anything? Are you changing your? I would imagine you had plans at the beginning of the year, then day one starts and changes. So how is your plan for the year changing as a result of this data feedback?
I think it's fluid. Based on the data and based on what we see, both at a district lens, but also at the school level, those principals and administrators are being given the freedom and the professional courtesy to go ahead and have those conversations with their teacher to say, where are we? What is it that we're hung up on, that our kids are getting stuck on? Where do we need to make those necessary adjustments? We are giving them the freedom and the reign at their school sites to go ahead and make those decisions and tell us, where do you need our support so that we can go ahead and target the support for your teachers and your staff.
So the local schools still have the freedom to implement unique programs for their school that they see work for them?
Things that make connections for teachers and students, that's priority. But again, let's be strategic about the tools that we have at our disposal. Use them as efficiently and with fidelity, but complement them with whatever resources will meet the needs for kids.
And thank you, Dr. Bowden, for just the way in which data has been brought forward today. I'm very much appreciative of you and your staff. Thank you.
I have a question as well. Special needs students with special learning disabilities like dyslexia and other things. We talked about it on the middle school level. How does it work with elementary?
Do you want to say anything?
Sure. So we talk a lot about students with special needs and students who have maybe language impairments and whatnot. And when we take a look at the data, one thing to note about iReady is the adaptiveness in the nature. So those students do have access to materials and areas where they are going to need their focus. Dyslexia specifically, I know that iReady has talked a lot about having research and stuff in that area, so I'll have to dig back in there and provide up some information.
But again, I think the adaptability of the program, again, is in one of the last presentations it talked about that it may read to the students. Again, I think talking about students with special needs, this is the perfect type of tool because it allows you to dig down and drill down to specific domains and needs that kids may have that in a traditional classroom, you may not have those resources available. This and the toolbox that are at the teacher's disposal, my goodness, they're just there and ready for the teachers to use.
How many hours of instruction a week are they having in iReady, and how much are they using iReady?
Go ahead.
So it does depend school by school, but the recommendation is 45 minutes per week per subject. So, 45 in math and 45 in reading, and that can look a lot of different ways at school. We really can't stress enough that it's quality over quantity. And so when we talk to principals and we share that data, we make sure to highlight those overall pass rates because that's something that we watch very closely. We want to make sure that even if it is less time, let's say they're in 30 minutes that week or whatnot, we want to make sure that the time that they are in is quality time and that students are actually gaining from the lessons. And to be honest, looking at the other side of it is the biggest piece is for students to be working in small groups with teachers. So it's within that data and the ability for teachers to be responsive to the data. If you go on some school campuses, you might see some students who only have 15 or 20 minutes in that week. And when you talk to teachers and say, hey, tell me a little bit about your data this week, they'll say, oh, well, I had to pull Brian this week because as I started to look at his class response to instruction data from the online instruction, we're noticing that he wasn't able to gain whatever the skill might have been. So the teacher's able to then respond to that data and pull him in a small group and may not utilize the online computer that week. So it really is fluid, but 45 minutes is the recommendation.
Really?
I think this shows how teaching is so different today than it was when I went to school. I mean, we all sat in our little desks and looked forward, and that was it. The teacher had, the lesson plans for math, the lesson plan for English, but now, they've got to have different lesson plans for these different groups, and it's a lot of work to prepare all that information. My daughter teaches kindergarten, and there's small little lessons all the time because you can't keep a kid, on task for very long. But it's a lot of work. I mean, it's not one lesson plan for reading anymore. It's 4, 5, or 6 different plans happening at the same day, the same time, and they're working in those small groups. And it's a lot different, but we see that, we know if a child is learning.
We do.
And if they're learning what we expect them to do or where they're missing. And hopefully, we'll fill all those gaps.
Well, and that's why, again, just in closing, I hope it was okay that we took it a step further and showed you drilling it all the way down to that student level, because that truly is the power of the program. Ms. Brown, that's exactly it. Teachers, they are so overwhelmed. They have so much on their plate. They have so much they're responsible for. We want to be there as giving them every tool that they need to support to
Could you
provide
use
their
more
kids.
tutors in the schools?
We will always take tutors. And again, reading pals,
That's what I'm thinking of. There are people out there watching this. If you have an hour a day, if you go an hour once a week, if you could come in and help tutor some of our students, you'd be a great help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't need to introduce Karen and Sue Meckler. They're going to give you a little, how are we identifying learning gaps in middle school?
Thank you, Dr. Kingsley. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're also going to start out with just a little history to show you the power of this program. During my 16 years of middle school, and particularly as a principal, I do understand and believe in the power of data, and particularly progress monitoring data. We have struggled for many years in finding an effective tool that will progress and monitor standards and skills while we are teaching and learning. In our tale of two teachers, year one of iReady implementation, which was last year, was a challenge. However, we did productively struggle, and we did learn the power in this tool. We learned how to best use the data and which particular data was useful. This is our second year, and we have a laser focus on what reports are essential, particularly for our lower quartile and individual struggling students. We're looking more deeply into student groups and into individuals, and we have responsible staff that are taking action at each step. We have a strategic plan. We are currently experiencing the best of times. Implementation of iReady has clarity and accountability. We are employing data-driven instruction and strategic intervention.
So I want to start by talking about some of the data with you, and similarly to what elementary shared, we're going to go ahead and look at our predicted proficiency report. The first piece of it will be focused on our district math proficiency, grades 6, 7, and 8. You can see where we were last year. We have 3 assessment periods known as AP1, AP2, and AP3 for our diagnostic windows.
Eric.
I just want to get nomenclature right again. So last presenter, they were showing us what people would have scored if they took the test today. What you're showing us here is predictive scores.
This is called predictive proficiency, which means if you look at our fall data at the bottom of this chart, if students were to take FSA today.
Today, not how they're going to score.
No, how they're going to be predicted to perform by the end of the year. So based on the diagnostic that they took in the fall, this is how they're predicted to perform on FSA in the spring.
As compared to if they had taken the test today,
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Madam Chair, I just want to make sure we got nomenclature.
Okay.
Right, predicted proficiency on how their performance will be on FSA in the spring. So with that being said, again, we see the accuracy of what the iReady data provides for us. There is a plus or minus 3% standard error of measure based on all of their stats and data they have done over the years. One of the things to look at is where our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were last year on AP2, where they ended the year in AP3, and then what our FSA results were. The outlier for mathematics is that our grade 8 students perform much higher than was predicted, and that is because of our algebra and geometry students' participation, and you know that increases our proficiency. If you look at our ELA data, you will see the same thing. And again, as elementary pointed out, we're looking at where students ended in grade 6 last year, where they're starting in grade 7 this year, and we are very hopeful that we will continue to see these increases to end up with our FSA being even greater at the end of this year.
Okay, if we're on
The master plan?
the master plan. So we're looking at, I don't think we're on the right slide. We want to go to 5. Okay, thank you. If we're looking at the impact of addressing our Year 1 challenges, we have listened to our teachers. Our administrators collectively agreed and worked with our schedulers to build 25 minutes in each school day at every middle school and devote that to our iReady computer-assisted instruction. Teachers across content areas have taken ownership of this. We have 2 days a week that students work in English language arts and 2 days in math. Our goal is to meet or exceed the 45 minutes of best practice with this program. And our current plan, which gets me the most excited, is the standards mastery formative and summative assessments. These are aligned to our focus guides, and this tool is essential for progress monitoring what we're teaching on a daily basis and how we're planning for instruction. The questions are aligned to our Florida Standards Assessment. They are FSA-like. Our students we are addressing gaps, not only with individual students, but by groups of students, and we are reteaching. We are using the program to do that. Teachers have multiple options, of which Ms. Meckler will talk about, and multiple ways to intervene. We can now answer the question, have students truly mastered what we are currently teaching? And that information is at not only students' fingertips, but teachers. Next slide, please. The teachers in the 25-minute period are focusing in on a particular report. It's been mentioned, the class response to intervention. Teachers are looking at alerts, making sure that students have passed the lessons. If they fail 2 lessons, it comes to a halt, and we're able to look and address that standard, which Sue will talk about, and the minutes that each student spends in online instruction as well. We want to make sure that we have that 45 minutes. And most importantly for me, in that relationship piece and that growth mindset, teachers are conferencing individually with students and celebrating their ability to learn. Next slide.
Yes. So, as Karen said, we are really focused on what teachers are doing and what reports they're looking at. The 25-minute teacher is looking at one specific report and having conversations with students about one specific data point. And that is how they are doing with their online instruction. In addition to that, the focus on standards mastery takes us, as Karen said, to what teachers are teaching on a daily basis and assessing on those skills to see if the teacher has still reached the transfer level of knowledge that the students need to master it. Oftentimes, teachers teach these skills at a surface level. They go deeper into the standard, and they feel that the students are doing very well. But for our students to be successful on FSA, they need to be able to transfer that knowledge with new text and various types of questions, and that's what standards mastery does. So it looks like we're going to run short on time, but I do want to introduce you to one teacher instead of 2. And that teacher is Ms. Daniels, a teacher at Booker Middle School who teaches some of our most striving students. She's a 25-year veteran teacher, and there's a quote there from her about what iReady is doing for her as a teacher and for her students. In looking at standards mastery data, I pulled one particular class of hers, and you can see the student success sorted from highest achievement to lowest achievement. This is on a standard based on FSA. In her intensive language arts class, you can see that 4 of her students did not do very well on this assessment. But we also look at the amount of minutes that those students spent on that assessment. These assessments should take students about 15 or 20 minutes. So one of those 25-minute periods that are built into our master schedule, a student was able to do this mini formative assessment. That's a conversation Ms. Daniels can then have with her students about how much effort and time they are putting into the work. We also look at students who are taking a long time to complete these and work with them on fluency and how they attack passages, so again, they can be more successful when it comes to a longer test and have the stamina to do that. The second document is specifically looking at how her class performed on that assessment. As a class, you can see that the students did not do well on question 1A and 1B, as well as question number 4. That becomes a Tier 1 intervention in which Ms. Daniels then puts the question and the text back to the students, allows them to work in groups together to redo that and talk about the strategies they use so that in future endeavors, they can be successful on that work. She then may have to go back and reteach, but really the ownership becomes on the students as learners and what strategies they're using to be successful.
What would cause every kid in the class to miss that one question? I mean, was it the way they understood, or was it maybe
so if you
the
look
question?
At the next slide, it's leading right into that. Thank you so much. You're going right there. So that particular question, 1A and 1B, is a 2-part question. If the student does not answer part A right, their chances of success on part B are basically zip. So it's resulting in how the students answered the first part if they can be successful on the second part. You'll see that there were 3 or 4 students who did answer part A right, but then they missed part 2. Part 2 is a deeper level of thinking. It is not multiple choice. They have to really look for evidence within the text to answer that question, and that's where we talk about the transfer level of a student's understanding of the complexity of the standard.
This was great because it taught me something I didn't know.
Yes.
How dirt gets out of clothes from the detergent.
And I wanted to give you the text and the question so that you could see the complexity. The second example, and I'll wrap up with this, gives you another example of a different passage and how the students are asked to compare 2 things, but it's not just about finding one right answer. So you'll see in iReady, they give the students partial credit. If they got part of it right, they will get partial credit. On FSA, that depends on the question itself. Sometimes FSA will give the student partial credit. Sometimes it's all right or all wrong. So we want students to understand the importance of really reading what the question is asking them and to make the best choices in those selections. The second teacher was a math teacher. We'll skip that for right now. And do we have a minute to jump to our last piece?
Yes.
All right. So we'd like to wrap up our last piece talking about what you've heard from several other people, and that's the growth mindset. We are very excited that there's been a shift of thinking for our students in middle schools. And that is, we're no longer talking about I failed an assessment, but the fact that I am not there yet. And our students are starting to see that it is okay to have productive struggle, and it is okay for me to not be there yet, but that I am getting there, and that eventually I will get it. So students are responding very well to this. Instead of putting a score that a student got 6 out of 10 and earned a D, it's now, you're not there yet, but you're getting there. And that's the message that is changing the mindset of our students.
And I would like to add, if we reflect on John Hattie's research, it's high impact for me as a learner to see myself and how am I learning, and iReady allows our students to progress monitor themselves. I would also like to share in closing, and I promise Dr. Kingsley, that this has been powerful for me as a principal and as a leader with principals. Sue and I and the middle school program specialist have been in every PLC working with all of our English language arts teachers and all of our math teachers in understanding the data. We are having powerful conversations, and not only are we communicating about groups of students, grade levels, schools, and individual students, we are taking action. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Jane.
Are we using this at Pineview?
I would say that Steve Canties can address that. Pineview has access to iReady, and they have been involved in some of our trainings, but I think that he would be able to give you a better answer.
Because I know last year some of the middle schools were indiscriminately, shall I say, using it. Just curious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I still have some. The science of soap. That sounds like somebody made it up. I mean, that's really true.
Yes, communication. All right. I'll keep rolling.
All right, so our last item before lunch is a discussion of communications. You have some information in your packet, but I just wanted to open with some introductory remarks. If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago where I thought we were in communication, I would tell you that I was ecstatic, that I thought that we had a new strategic vision, that we were implementing that vision, that our activity in developing new channels of communication with the public was up. We had done our first digital town hall, and I was really excited about where we were headed with communications. We have a strategic plan today for communications that we should not shy away from. We've had a setback. The terminology that I've used is it's never a good day when those that you trust disappoint you, and so we've had to sever ties with our previous firm that was working with us in communications and advocacy. And so today I want to talk about what the pathway is forward to make sure that we maintain that momentum moving forward. And so what I've outlined for you is 3 scenarios, and then there's some background information just to put some of the numbers in context. Today we're going to talk about the leadership of the communications department, but we're just looking at the top of that organizational chart. When we talk about communications, please know that communications includes more than the staff on the 3rd floor here at the landings. The communications budget includes the education channel, which is at the technical college at the intersection of Beneva and Proctor, and it also includes our website. And so many people look at the overall budget figure for communications and question how that number came about. So I wanted to provide to you the context of the full department, because I've had people say, I didn't know we had 8 people in the communications department. We don't have 8 people on the 2nd floor of, or excuse me, 3rd floor of the landings. Joe?
As you mentioned, the full department, it would be remiss if we didn't also include the volunteers.
Thank you. Absolutely.
As well.
Yes, volunteer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so you have that organizational chart as part of the packet. The cover letter explains 3 scenarios moving forward for the communications department. Scenario A is what we were operating under, which was we had an outside communications firm in the lead position and then staff directed by a communications manager. That cost for that option was, where are we at?
Total cost, 784.
Right. Yeah. So total cost, you'll notice the associated staff is consistent at that 551, which includes volunteer partnership, web services, and the education channel. And so our current expenditures in communications was that $784,000 figure, just shy of 785. Scenario B would flip the relationship between the communications firm and the lead person in communications. We have included for your reference the job description for Director of Communications with the caveat of if we went with scenario B, I would advocate that we revisit that job description. I believe that job description was last visited in 2006, correct, I believe. And so we would want to spend a little bit of time looking at the Director of Communications. If we went with a Director of Communications, we are predicting that our cost for the outside PR firm would go down, and we would certainly negotiate a scenario. So we have targeted about a $90,000 contract with an outside PR firm, and so total costs very comparable at $786. And I've included scenario C. Scenario C is probably the scenario that we operated under for the longest period of time, in which we had both a Director of Communications and a communications specialist, but no outside involvement by a PR firm. And so if you looked at our budget for the 16-17 school year, we operated under scenario C with a total cost of $818,000, just shy of $819,000. So I present those scenarios to you for discussion. With really kind of the overall guiding philosophy is just making sure that we're maintaining our momentum in communications.
Who wants to go? Bridget?
Well, thank you. I would be remiss if I said I was not equally disappointed. I had high hopes in general for just a revamping, because I think communications is just, it's too critical of a component of the district's job to communicate with all of the stakeholders. And so trying to find a refreshing medium, not just the individual, but also the ways in which we do that and try to break out of the mold. So I was encouraged by the strategic plan, but certainly it did not work out the way I don't think any of us had hoped. Two things I want to say is, and I want to be cautious, and words matter. So when I think of any kind of outsourced element of it, I would not say I don't want to see a PR firm, because I think that's different than a communications supportive service, because to me PR means like a publicist, something that's maybe, so that I want to be clear from me personally, from a direction, whatever we choose, it is to be transparent, to tell the story, to tell the good stuff that's going on in the district, but to be able to face the struggling things that are going on, but ultimately to bridge, have a two-way communication with our community, our parents, most importantly, our parents and our educators and our students. So that's just the large vision that I'd like to see. I think that when we talk about the mechanism in which we use also really matters, and I don't know that we've drilled down into that, and that's also a cost incurred to the district as well. I mean, we talk about the education channel and some of the costs incurred there, different ways. I know I've talked to different administrators who would love to have school site videos or stuff like that for their families and local community to understand. So those are things that I'd like to get a better sense of, but I know we have to start here. So, I'd want to just see us be forward thinking and have a refreshing look or outlook on it. I have caution given what transpired, but I don't want to lose ground and momentum to something that I believe is in the best interest of the entire district but be cautious at the same time. So,
Jay?
May I respond to that real quick?
Sure.
During the issue of the RFP originally, we did receive some feedback from some other firms that downloaded the RFP and didn't believe that they had the capacity to take the lead under scenario A. And so as you look at the different scenarios in scenario B, there were a number of firms who, matter of fact, several even wrote to our purchasing manager that said we would be interested but are uncomfortable with taking the lead. And so I think that if you did scenario B, it certainly would require that we reissue the RFP because it is a different scope of services, and I do think you would get more respondents than we got when we issued the original RFP under scenario A.
Jane?
Well, in looking at this, I was never really sure that I was in favor of scenario A, although I was willing to go with it. And there were a number of reasons why, but I was kind of leaning towards scenario B, but now I'm really leaning towards scenario C, and here's the reasons. In looking back at the history of the school district in my 20 years or so of working with communications, there are things in our district that are confidential. And there are things that we were asking an outside firm to do for us that I thought were a real stretch for them, and I think this was of concern to some of the, let's say, parties that didn't answer the RFP, to come to all cabinet meetings and board meetings and be involved in some of those things was a stretch. But I also am concerned about the confidentiality side of that. And the other thing is that I know that there are so many things about education that are specific to education, and that these people who are generally do a great job in marketing and communications and PR, any number of those things, do not always have that fit or that understanding of education. So they'd have to spend some time getting acclimated and getting up to snuff, so to speak. I think that in talking to specifically Sheila Wise, who called me about a week ago from New York, and she was a great communications director here. She said, you know, I just was concerned that, you know, people didn't understand and that the confidentiality piece of it, but she said, you know, I'd be glad to sit down and talk to anybody anytime and give them my perspectives. I also got a call from David Voss, who also had performed various pieces and parts of communications for Wilma Hamilton when she was here. But I really like what Orange County does. And Orange County is and has always done a great deal in that arena. They have had at the helm a person who has also done governmental affairs and some other things for them in the past. I think they have best practice. I think Collier County has a really good department as well. I know when I first stole the app that we used for a little while for our phones a few years ago. We got that from Collier County. And I know that they have put a lot of emphasis into their in-house communications department. So I think that for me, we need to do some due diligence, and we really need to look at some of these other school districts and best practice perhaps for what they're doing. I really think that scenario C, or some complement now maybe of B, short term, hiring someone to do some things that we might need to do in a crunch or from the outside might be an alternative, but I'm really leaning towards C.
Shirley?
I share some of those same concerns. From the very beginning, calling it a PR firm, I said, yeah, why is this a PR firm? We need an advocacy plan for the district, and I wanted to see an advocacy plan, and we even thought we'd have some input on what our advocacy plan looked like. We ended up getting something of an advocacy plan. But I think there was a problem when we had an outside firm kind of being over the district communications department. I thought that was a problem, and it did, but I think Jane brings up a good point in that, yeah, maybe we've got some confidential information, but I know that before we've gone out and we've had, like you said, David Voss did some things for us, and I'd want to hear from our communications staff, what do we need? Or maybe if not them, from you, what specifically do we need? Why are we going out for this, what is it that they're going to give us that we're not getting now? And if it's just that the staff we've got now can't handle everything we're asking for, and then we're looking at, do we hire a company or do we hire an individual? I don't know that having somebody that worked right for us might not work better. So I mean, I'm hesitant about going out and looking for another firm, but I definitely wouldn't want A. So I'm looking between B and C.
Yeah. Just a quick sidebar. I mentioned this to several school board members in different districts because I've been to some meetings lately and so forth. And in talking to Orange County, for an example, there's a lot of counties there. There's Seminole and Orange and Osceola and Volusia, and the media market for getting your stories out which is something we always want to do, is the channel, Wish Channel 2 and various different channels. And I was laughing to hear that, after day one of school starting in August, Orange kind of shut down all the other counties getting information, because one day they were highlighting food service, and one day and what they were doing to get ready for school, and one day they were highlighting facilities, and one day they were talking about IT. So they had a big story on IT and all the work you'd done in the summer to prepare the schools. So some of the other school board members from Seminole and other counties go, this just isn't working well. But they had all these things, and they had an aggressive action plan. And I think sometimes we get ourselves internally into a reacting mode.
Right.
And I don't know how Scott handles all he handles. And I've always, looked to him and said, gee, you really just get hammered. And I used to be in marketing and community relations with a local organization here in town, and I used to get beaten to death because you really have a hard time getting proactive because you're reacting so very much. So I just think there's some merit to looking at some of those other counties and coming up with a strategy.
I was a director of marketing at JFCS. That's how I started. And I worked 50, 60-hour weeks because you just cannot do it all. Joe?
Oh, well, Eric, if you'd like to.
You go first then.
No, please. The gentleman with the bow tie always goes first.
First off, you clean up very well, Joe. I think he's doing an excellent job as interim director of communications / permanent director of IT. When I was coming on the board, I recognized that our communications was an area that we needed improvement on. And I think that in the past 6 months, we have seen improvement in our communications department. But I struggle with this is because I've been on many policy boards, but regardless of that, I went to the FSBA new member orientation. And Caroline was there in the room, and the main focus was stay in your lane. The main focus was you don't get involved in hiring a staff and an organization. You get down to this level. That's the superintendent's role. It's our role to say, superintendent, you need to improve your communications. Mm-hmm. Superintendent, these are the things that here are the goals that we want to do, and the implementation of that is up to you. And then we had training last week, and we discussed this almost on point, exactly on point about this issue. Now, while it's tempting that we want to micromanage and we want to get into this and we want to tell him, you need to hire this person here and get to outsource this, and you should have the level, like like this. That's not my place. I'm going to stay in my lane, and I'm going to realize that you guys hired a superintendent. You guys trust the superintendent. I think he's going to do the right thing. If he doesn't do the right thing, he doesn't approve communication, then we'll have a nice little talk with Dr. Bowden. But until Dr. Bowden doesn't execute on what I believe he can do, until that time, I'm willing to give Dr. Bowden the freedom to decide, I'm going to stay in my lane, Dr. Bowden, and it's not my place to give you a suggestion. It's very hard. It's very tempting. Maybe if you wanted it privately, but clearly doing it out in the open, trying to micromanage and get down to your staffing level, I don't believe, personally, I'm just talking for myself, it's not my place. And so I'm sure everybody wants to hear this. I'm going to shut up.
Well, it is our place because ultimately we approve the budget, and this is part of the budget coming in. So there are times when the superintendent can ask what we think because it will impact our budget. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Board Chair, and thank you all for being here. And so what I'd like to do is just offer you some food for thought as we have this discussion and things that I've learned in the almost 2 weeks that I've stepped into this role temporarily. I've continued to reassure the IT staff, you haven't gotten rid of me yet. I'm coming back. But some things that I've learned that I wanted to point out for you all. And as I sit up here, I actually think I'm in a unique situation that I can share some thoughts about doing governmental work differently. And over 10 years ago, the IT department began to do some things differently by partnering with Sarasota County government to better leverage tax dollars in a shared data center and some shared staff, especially on the security side. Within the IT department, and to the point that it was actually recently applauded in the Public CIO magazine for my counterpart Glenn Zimmerman over at SCGov and I's work together, and how do we best leverage our collective tax dollars to provide the best value for Sarasota County taxpayers. And part of what these scenarios represent is how are we continuing to best leverage the tax dollars. One of the things that I've learned in this time as acting communications director is that there is a tremendous amount of work being asked of the collective communication staff. And part of that work is how do we support our school leaders in the multitude of things that are coming at them every day so they can remain focused on their goal of improving student achievement at the school. And so, and in addition to sharing what I affectionately refer to as the good news that's happening at our schools in our district. And so part of one of the things that the addition of outside resources present is it presents the opportunity for more feet on the ground for things that need addressing that a smaller staff can't do. So not that I was asked, and I may be stepping bounds here just a touch, so I'll look for eyes from Superintendent Bowden if I am. But, I think that Jane brings up a good point that there is confidentiality situations that need to occur. So you need a captain of that ship. And scenario B provides that captain of that ship for those sensitive confidential situations. What scenario B then also provides is the additional feet on the ground for the multitude of things that are happening. So if we look at today alone, we've had a multitude of media requests for things that are happening beyond the school board workshop this morning and beyond the school board meeting that'll happen this afternoon. Well, how are those things supported at the school level from knowledgeable people, because they're not controversial necessarily in nature, but they are things that our schools are looking for support on and how to best handle. Well, by having a firm that has additional people available when we need them and not paying for them all the time, when I'm here as my role as IT director, I talk to you about virtualization and our ability to a little bit of a techie term here, but spin up servers while we temporarily need them for the load while we need them, and then spin them down and not incur the costs for there. It makes good sense, both economically and to meet the needs of our district. By having a firm that we can quickly contract with that is led by an in-house person, there's a lot of merit to that in those times of need. When there's less time of need, well, then that's up to the firm to figure out how they continue to employ those. The last piece that I'll put there, kind of out there, and going back to the original conversation that I brought up about the idea of joint use between Sarasota County government and Sarasota County schools, there were many skeptics about that 10 plus years ago. But what has allowed us to be successful with that is the school district and Sarasota County government made a conscious effort to hang our egos at the door to say, this is what's best for our community. The school district has obviously done that in the past, and what we're looking for now is a solution that continues to be best for our community.
What you're citing, Joe, is government to government. This is totally different. This is bringing in someone from the outside to do this. And in my mind, scenario A is off the table for me. I do not believe that we should have an outside firm and our staff reporting to that firm. I think it's wrong. I can go between B and C. I would really like to see C. And I'd like to see, and I understand how much money it is in here. It's a few dollars more, which I don't understand, but it's a few dollars more. But I still would like that, and I'd like to see a plan. If we go with whatever one we go to, I want to see a working plan. There's been no plan out there, other than to scurry around and do as much as you can do, and do your press releases, and that's unless I'm wrong. And I don't think there's a plan out there. Can you just tell me if there's a plan out there?
Sure, we have a comprehensive plan.
When did you get it?
Weren't we given it the day we got the contract to approve?
Absolutely. Every board member has it, and I'd be happy to send it back out again.
Oh. Okay. Let me finish, please, Scott. Todd. I think that's an outside plan. I think we could take that plan and we could use it with our staff inside. I don't see why we have to go outside, unless you want to hire someone on and off, as you say, to do something during peak periods.
And Madam Chair, if I can clarify my statements, that's exactly what I was saying, is that you leverage the capability of the opportunity to contract with a firm that has additional people available when needed, but is still led by in-house staff.
First of all, I agree with the chair's position. I'm not here advocating for option A. And so one of the things that I was looking for is some direction as to what do we do next. And so option B and C both include a director of communication. So I think what happens next is we revise the job description for the director of communications. We represent that to the board. We advertise and hire that position, and then allow that person to visit Orange County, visit Collier County, to look at the plan that was put forth by 360 Communication, to allow them to formulate their plan. And maybe once we have a director of communications on board who's done that, we come back to the workshop table and then decide how do we support that director of communications. Is it with additional staff or is it with an outside firm? But that may not be a question that we have to make today. The guidance that I really needed today is, do we go back and negotiate with the other firm under option A, or do we go to work revising that job description? And I think we're all in agreement. Let's look at that job description. Let's get a director in here. Let's do some due diligence. And then let's reconvene and see where we go forward.
And everyone that's in place will currently stay in place right now.
We are not here to tell him who he can and can't
He
fire.
has asked for input. I am giving it. You give input a lot, Eric, on a lot of issues that are not part of your responsibilities. So please don't criticize me when I do what you do.
I'm not criticizing. With you. We can both disagree.
Yeah, we can disagree, but don't do it then if you're going to disagree.
Can I ask the superintendent a question?
Sure.
On this cost center chart, what does it mean, the ones that are in the dashed lines, broken lines? You know, like the videographer editor, the cable and digital production specialist, and then there's a director of communications administrative. It says delete. I mean, are these positions we're adding or taking off? I don't understand.
Adding.
So currently we have a vacancy for the video editor, the one, and the director of communications.
Vacant position?
That is a vacant position.
We okayed that position, I think, last month.
Yes.
We okayed
So it's a new position?
It was a 0.6 position that retired, and then we've moved it to a 1.0. And then I've made the decision within the organizational chart to move it under web services with the idea that it would not be producing 30-minute or 1-hour content for the education channel, but more in support of schools and these video shorts of 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
And the cable and digital production specialist, 0.6, is that new position?
That's the position that's being deleted.
Deleted. Okay. And so then the cable and digital production specialist, head producer, that's the one that's going to be doing the half-hour video. Who's going to be doing the content for the education channel?
So that would be Leanne McIntyre. Then you see the production specialist head producer. That's Kim Stalker. And then I believe I'm not sure which one of these is Larry, to try to put names on it, but then the one under online communications, that position has been advertised, but we've yet to conduct interviews for it.
Okay.
That's mean.
But is there going to be some changes to that too? Because I understand that we were looking at some changes to how the programming on that channel is going forward. Or are we going to wait till we get our communication specialist?
We're going to continue to examine to make sure we're deploying all of our resources in communication in ways that are most efficient. So that was a long answer for yes. We'll continue to look at that.
So online communications, that's Mina. We're not doing anything with that.
He now has a videographer position to do online content.
Okay. So he didn't take over the videographer editor. That's still another job. Under it, the dotted lines under it.
No, we're right here.
Yeah.
Online communication specialist. This is a new position that will report to Mina.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Bridget.
Joe, thank you very much. And I know IT's just a small job, not that important in the district at all. So, I know you had all this extra time, but obviously I'm sarcastic, and I really appreciate you stepping up and your attitude and just being very positive and your objective viewpoint. I actually think Eric makes a very good point. And I did want this discussion to be, may not be the only one, but wanted it to be up in front because of what transpired. And I think that's healthy and important to go forward. But I do also believe that there's a limit to where we think and what you ultimately do. You're held accountable based on the end game of what we hold you to. Certainly, we have the authority from a budgetary standpoint, but I do think it does get a little granular, and I appreciate kind of garnering the feedback, because I know that was a concern from other board members when there was movement to go away from the typical scenario. But so now it sounds like I just wanted to add that. I just think that we have to be cautious, but there was an opportunity to bring feedback. But I just want to make sure that it's done the right way, it's done authentic and transparently, but that's ultimately on you. So that's what I want to say.
When something is put in front of me and I am asked to make a decision on it, I will give input to you. If you didn't put it in front of me and ask me for input, I'm glad you did, because we didn't have any input on the last one. And you're absolutely right, and it's a budget item, so it has to come. Eric?
Is this going to require a budget amendment? Are you going to be able to do this within the existing budget?
It will require a budget amendment because we're adding a position back in
No, I'm talking about
to the budget.
Dollars. Money.
Well, the money that was previously allocated to the contract will not be expended under contracts. And so you can see the budget implications of returning the position to the budget. So there will be a budget amendment moving money from contracted services into a director of communications position.
Okay, thank you.
Where do we go from here? Don't put me lunch. Where do we
To
go
lunch.
from here?
Well, where we go from here is that we will rewrite the director of communications position. It will make its way to a school board meeting. That position will then be the subject of discussion. Hopefully, accept that new job description, and then we will advertise and fill the director of communications position.
Okay, and then we'll discuss. Then you'll discuss what else you're going to do with.
Correct. There'll be a period of time in which we'll do some study and talk to other districts and see where we go from there.
All right. Any further questions? All right. When do we have to be back here? Doing this after lunch.
Well, to stay on our timeline, we were coming back at 1 o'clock. I don't know that a 18-minute lunch would get us there, but might I suggest 12:15, or excuse me, 1:15?
1:15, yeah. Yeah.